welcome to this special event. This event on the State of Religions in Hong Kong 2022 is organized by the Center on Religion and the Global East at Purdue University and co-sponsored by Hong Kong Institute of Humanities and the Social Sciences. During this event, we will first launch the online spiritual atlas of the Global East, Hong Kong, and then ask the experts of religion in Hong Kong to go over the religions as shown on the maps, have some discussion. Then we will have a Q&A time. And if you have questions, please type that question in the chat room. Then we'll, after the presentations, we'll have a time for the Q&A. My name is Fenggang. I'm the director of the Center on Religion and the Global East at Purdue University. Our center used to be called the Center on Religion and the Chinese Society. In summer 2020, we changed the name to the Center on Religion and the Global East. We have an expanded scope on East Asian societies and East Asian diasporas, and also East Asian cultures around the world. And as part of the current project on Global East religiosity and the changing religious landscapes, we are developing this online spiritual atlas of the Global East. And this is our first event under the new project and also under the new name of the center. So I want to welcome everyone who is here, and actually there's still people joining. So really welcome everyone. And let me first introduce the speakers. And after I introduce the speakers, I will demonstrate how to use the online spiritual atlas. The speakers, we have three renowned scholars joining me. The first one is Dr. Kim-Kwong. He received a couple of doctoral degrees, and he is an ordained Protestant minister who had served at and retired from ecumenical and interfaith agencies. He had published a dozen books, mainly on Christianity in China, with the recent one called Understanding World Christianity, China by Fortress Press in 2019. Since his retirement, other than holding a small clinical practice in psychotherapy, he has kept a research interest in the faith dynamics of the Belt Road Initiative and is currently affiliated with the Hong Kong Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences at Hong Kong University as a research associate. The next one is Ying Fuk-tsang. He's a professor of Divinity School of Chung College, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and also the director of the Christian Study Center on Chinese Religion and Culture, and the director of the Center for Christian Studies at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Ying studied history at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and received a PhD. He is the author and editor of more than 20 academic books, including Christianity and the Chinese Religious Order in the New Era, published in 2019. It is in Chinese. And another book is Christianity's Failure in China, ? Essays on the history of Chinese Communist movement and Christianity. This was published in 2012, also in Chinese. His current research focuses on party state, society, and Protestant Christianity in contemporary China, the history of Christianity in China, and the Chinese theology and the history of Christianity in Hong Kong. The third speaker is David Palmer. He received a PhD in sociology and he's a professor of anthropology jointly appointed by the Hong Kong Institute for the Humanities and the Social Sciences and the Department of Sociology at the University of Hong Kong. His award-winning books include Qigong Fever, Body, Science, and Utopia in China by Columbia University Press, The Religious Question in Modern China, co-authored with Vincent Boussard, published by the University of Chicago Press. And the third book meant to be mentioned is Dream Trippers, Global Taoism and the Predicament of Modern Spirituality, co-authored with Siegler and published by the University of Chicago Press. He is the convener of the Asian Religious Connections Research Cluster at the Hong Kong Institute for the Humanities and the Social Sciences, and coordinates collaborative research projects on Taoism among the Yao ethnic minority in the China-Vietnam-Laos borderland, and also on religious entanglement with the Belt and Road Initiative. And thank you to the scholars who joined me today on this special event. First, let me introduce you the website of the online spiritual atlas of the Global East. Let me share the screen. Okay. Actually, if you can think of Global East as a concept, Global East, I coined this term to mean that East Asian societies, East Asian diasporas, East Asian cultures around the world. So if you go to your web browser and search for global, okay, Global East Center, that may, it will show up here. So this is our homepage of the website of the center. And under here, there are things on top. OSAGE is the acronym of Online Spiritual Atlas of the Global East. If you click here, it will show there's OSAGE China, OSAGE Korea, OSAGE Hong Kong, and OSAGE Japan. And right now we have mapped religions in China and religions in Korea, a preliminary version of it. And then the latest is OSAGE Hong Kong. And in the near future, we will launch OSAGE Japan. And we are expanding to more societies in East Asia and also in some diaspora communities as well. And so today is we are officially launching this online spiritual atlas of the Global East, Hong Kong. If you click that, the first screen, you will see the religious sites, their distribution in Hong Kong. And here it includes the major religions and all the religions actually we could find. And I will let you know that the data is collected by Dr. Chan, and he will explain more about the data collection and data typology. But here, if you come here, you see on the left of the screen, you can religious sites and also the distribution in the different districts. There are some thematic maps and also data analytics. For the religious sites, here, if you see, you can see there are the different colors, and each color represents a particular religion. If you use one of these little symbols here, you can see this is for the legend. The color of green represent a mosque. In blue is a Taoist temple, and then lighter blue is folk religion, purple Catholicism, orange is Buddhism, red Protestantism, and then there are other religions. So if you look at closely, you will see in many places there are multiple religions. And so you can, if you are interested in one particular religion, you can use this filter function and choose that religion. For example, Buddhism, Buddhist temples. Then you click on this, it will only show the religious, the Buddhist temples in Hong Kong. And here you can get back to the center. You can see other, for example, Catholicism. So this is one of the functions. Next, you can see the religious, the predominant religion in the 18 districts in Hong Kong. Predominant religion means the religion that has the largest number of religious. And if you remember, red is the Protestant church and orange is a Buddhist temple. It means in these districts, the Protestant are the predominant religion. And in these districts are the Buddhist temples as a predominant. If you click each, you do see the numbers of religious sites in that district. If you select only Buddhism, you can see the distribution where you have more Buddhist temples versus those have few Buddhist temples in the district. And you can easily just select the religion you're most interested. Here, you may see some district does not look like having Taoist temple, but sometimes it's difficult to distinguish Taoism and folk religion. So there are some temples in that district as well. Right, so you can just look at for each of the religions. Then we also produced some thematic maps because Hong Kong is special in some way in their religion. One is that so many religions are present in Hong Kong because of the religious freedom is really in a very high level up to now. So if you choose minor religions, the religions besides the major ones, I just showed you, or those who can be seen in the district map or the religious sites map. Here, the minor religions, if you want to see which ones are represented, again, you can use the legend function to see. You see Baha'i. There are some groups that's related to Christianity, but not the mainstream Christian traditions. Then there are Confucianism, there are Falun Gong sites, Hinduism, Jainism, Judaism, Orthodox Christianity, Sikhism, the Unification Church, and Zoroastrianism. Similarly, if you want to see only the religion you are most interested, you can get here a filter function. It will show only that religion's website. Confucianism, that's we use the word Ru to represent because it is hard to find a other symbol that may be good to represent Confucianism. Oops. All right. Why is suddenly the screen is bigger? Okay. Oh, because of my screen. Let me go back. Okay. Another thing is many observers and those who live in Hong Kong notice the large number of Christian schools from kindergarten to high school. So we also mapped Hong Kong schools. And with Hong Kong schools, you can use the same function of legend to see which ones are represented, and also use the filter function to see where are the schools by each religion, and also the non-religion schools. Okay. And finally, I want to show you, we have some function on the called the data analytics. If you are more interested in the charts and the numbers tables, here is where you see. Here gives you the overall proportion of each religion of all the religious sites. More than 50% are Protestant churches, but there are significant presence of large numbers of folk religious temples, Catholic churches, Buddhist temples, and so on. And here on the right side of the this is maps by district. If you put your cursor just on each district, it shows you the bar chart. So in that district, which religion has a larger or smaller number of sites. So it's a dynamic map. And here are the legends. So make easy to see, to understand. We also provided this line chart of Christian churches and Christian schools. And each point represent a district. In that district, the number of Christian churches and the number of Christian schools. Of course, it's highly correlated. The line shows as a correlation. And finally, here is the temple. The table for each of the district and also the type of religion. Where do you find them? and the number of them. Okay, so this is a quick overview of the online spiritual atlas of the Global East, Hong Kong. And we produced this Osage Hong Kong because luckily we have Dr. Chen, who collected the data. It's the most comprehensive list of religious venues, religious sites in Hong Kong. We also have a team of researchers, postdocs, and graduate assistants who joined me for this project. And we thank every one of them for their contribution to Osage Hong Kong. And now I want to turn to our speakers, let them to present what they have prepared. First, Dr. Chen.
Thank you, Professor Yang, for your kind introduction and also the very dynamic interactive tools that for many years to come that will benefit a lot of researchers. And I have heard about people who collect butterflies, stamps, and coins. And when I first met Professor Gordon Melton, I don't know if he's here today or not. If not, then I have to really mention him because after I encountered him about 20 years ago, I realized that there was a guy who is the world's foremost collector of religions. He had literally collected all kinds of religions, wrote many encyclopedias, and he told me that Hong Kong will be a fascinating place to study the existence of large varieties of religions, as Hong Kong has been the meeting place between the East and the West, and with the social tolerance of diverse cultural manifestations. His comment on Hong Kong was an awakening moment for me to re-examine the religious profile of this place, even though I have been already working as the secretary of the Hong Kong's de facto religious council, namely the Six Religious Leaders Colloquium, for many years. And I was rather familiar with the major religious traditions, but I was totally ignorant to many other religions which have been living side by side with me for years. My curiosity led me to write a series of papers, articles, and entries and encyclopedia on religion in Hong Kong. As the more I was being introduced into these areas, I realized that there are so many religious groups. Either they are within a religious tradition, very diverse, or amongst the interreligious dynamics. And I was also curious to find out why in this space in Hong Kong that the world religion, be it traditional world religion or new religious movement across the globe, was able to coexist in this place without any major interreligious conflicts like in other places. And I came up with three major factors. First of all, Hong Kong being part of the Chinese cultural milieu and experienced more than a century and a half of British governances, exposure to the Western culture, it became the ideal place to as a crossing road between the East and West, where different religious manifestations can be included as well as tolerated. So Hong Kong became a very highly tolerant society to embrace various different cultural manifestations, from various cuisines to various religions. And secondly, under the British colonial governances, the government adopted a very interesting approach to religion, both with highly respectful to local traditions, and at the same time, adopt a laissez-faire approach. That means there's no legal definition, at least until this date, on religion, nor any legal definition of religious organizations. So there is no administrative measure over religious groups, no religious policy, and no law on religion except some minor ones governing the temples. So therefore, there is no such thing as a religious policy or control or mechanisms. And therefore, religion or religious group just becomes a self-defined group as one of the many so-called civil organizations. And many of those religious groups can exist as an organization or even as a limited company. And most of them actually are limited companies. In Hong Kong, we have more than 3 million limited companies. So it's quite easy for you and I, next time you come to Hong Kong, we register a new religion for $2,150 Hong Kong dollars, and then you can start your business there. So because of such a low entry requirements, it encouraged many different groups to set foot in Hong Kong to try out the best in this highly competitive spiritual market. And thirdly, with the increased population migration, especially with the economic booms in Asian regions, we have a lot of new peoples, sort of migrants, entering and using Hong Kong from the Filipinos, Indonesians, Thais, Indians, Pakistanis, Korean, Japanese, and Central Asians and Middle Eastern Africans. And especially most of them had tried to use Hong Kong as a station area to engage business in China. So these people brought along with them not only business, but also their practices, including religious practices. And they not only exist among the expats, but also introducing to the local communities. So we have a new influx of various religions during the past 20, some about 30 years. With all this in mind, these factors in mind, Professor Gordon Melton and Dr. Ed Irons, I don't know if he's here tonight or not, had actually embarked for Hong Kong religious group directories and since the mid year 2000. Professor Palmer and I was also helping with that project at that time. And it resulted into the first, I would say at that time, most comprehensive religious directories in Hong Kong. This is the copy. And it's a bit blurred because I turned in there. And it's a very thick volumes and with very limited circulation because there's no market value at all. And at that time, there wasn't any group interested to know about the Hong Kong's religion as a whole. There were many directories, but only made or produced by their own religious group, by their own self-interest, but not a comprehensive one. So I've since their book's publication and upon this foundation, began to collect names and addresses of different religious groups as a pastime. Most of these groups just established as a standalone group with little or no affiliation with other groups. And they are often they will just appear, pop up in the building, and I pass by, look at the signs and look at the building directory and record it down and trace it down. And after I retired several years ago, I kept this project in mind. So I have an assistant, Mr. Gao Xintong, a very competent assistant, and we start to update this particular directory. And by the year 2200, we have an extra 40% of entries from since 2008 directories. So we came up with this huge directory, and I have no idea what to do with it. So I contact Professor Yang, and he's very graciously helped us with some of his grants so that we can key the whole thing into some kind of usable format, plus his team to put it in today's excellent database. But there are many qualifications and limitations of these directories. First of all, we only list those which are officially registered in any kind of form with the government. Accountability, be it in a company, association, or under ordinance, with certain administrative setups, accountability to the civil authorities. So we do not include private gatherings without legal entities, such as those mediumships, or private shrines, or the Taoist ritualists, or shrine within the police stations, even though they are officially acknowledged, even by the police with regular practices, but they are not an official legal entity. And also, secondly, with a physical address. So we don't recognize by the post office, not post office box, but no virtual things. And it has to be a physical address. And not only those generally known locations. For example, there are many mediumship services under the bridge of Canal Street, which we do not include because it's not recognized by the post office as an address. And also, they got to have facilities that can conduct religious activities, such as a chapel and altar. Not an organization like a publisher or church headquarters or mission administrative office without regular religious services. So And also those religious services has to be somehow listed and open to their members and or to the non-members. So we do not include those private mass by the Opus Dei or the Masonic activities. So you may have many criticism to our current work, and you are rightly to feel so because you may find a lot of shortcomings. First of all, we list them under different categories as broad as possible, as many of these religious categories are established by a group with self-defined doctrinal stance, or sometimes in a rather liberal way. For example, the Taoist Association in Hong Kong officially includes all the folk religious groups under its umbrella, but many folk religious groups would not like to join them. So how do we define them? Is it Taoism or folk religion? Or some Christian groups may tend to reject those which does not fall into its doctrinal stance as non-Christian or as heresies. You will put in the fringe. There will be a lot of controversial in there. Or for example, the Zhen Fozhong, the True Buddhist school. The Buddhist Association may not be happy with that, but we regard it as part of the Buddhism. So we are not in any position or any authorities to judge which group belongs to what, for we are not in the business of religious taxonomy. But we are neither politically correct or doctrinally correct. But nevertheless, we try to do as much as possible, and we are open for these discussions. And also there's another issue. We encounter the post-colonial language issue. As many of these local religions are not operating in the colonial language, basically English. And often they have to come up with an English name for official purpose, and which may be transliterated or translated, and they may not necessarily reflect the true nature of the religion. So very often those groups may just have their own Chinese names without English translation, or some with Sanskrit transliterations, such as some of the Buddhist groups, or others may bear Chinese transliteration or dynamic equivalent terms. So at some of the groups, even remain the non-English ones. For example, the French Mission Order, Mission Intergérée de Paris, they still keep this French name instead of using the English names. And we keep whatever officially presented by this group as their self-understanding, as the way they like to present to the public, instead of giving them some kind of translated addition into English or Chinese. Bear in mind that there are many Islamic prayer halls in Hong Kong. They use actually Urdu or an Arabic and some Indonesian without any English names or Chinese names. Very often for registration purpose, they have English transliteration names. And then there's no way I can translate it into Chinese anyways. So we keep it as much as original as they are. And there's a whole group of literature on post-colonial linguistic studies on this issue. And we do not want to occidentalize them, our Eastern Asian tradition. Otherwise, we will do injustice to our own cultural heritage. And also, bear in mind that we just list the venues, but regretfully, we cannot give the size of the religious population. For their definitions of the population, whether it is weekly services or in the festival devotees, is a great differences between the monotheistic religion and also the polytheistic religions in Asia in general. So that it's not a strength in terms of population, in terms of worshipper, because there's so many different ways to count numbers. The size, the venue, the limited number doesn't mean that they have a very small size in population. Just give you an example. We have 3 Confucius sites in Hong Kong. And Confucius headmaster, Dr. Ton, had once spoke to me, say that, oh, Dr. Chen, are you Chinese? Yes, I am. Do you believe, do you follow a filial pieties and all those Confucius cultural ethics? Yes, of course I am. Then you are a Confucius follower. And then without realizing that, I just became one. And he said, how many followers are there in Hong Kong? He said, oh, 6 million we have. So the size, the number of venue doesn't correspond to the followers numbers in this case. So we may have other ways to study, but in the field of religious studies, especially in Asian settings, the headcount is always a challenging issue for academic purpose. And finally, there's very interesting part that I like to raise about the religious situation in Hong Kong is that in such a dense urban settings, many of the religious venues are housed under the same street address in the same building, but on different floors, or even on the same floor but different flats. In this case, in our current map, we just use the predominant site numbers on their districts to represent their particular buildings, so-called position. But actually, it may not do injustice in many cases, as there may be like 3 Christian groups over there, but there are another 2 Taoist within the same building. And one of the building accounts 7 different groups of 3 different religions. Yes, they were just represented by one. I'm looking forward for some kind of perhaps challenging for the technical part for Professor Yang. I'm sure you'll come up with an idea, a 3-dimensional multi-layer stretchable things that we can point like in those movies in this room and that room, so that we will do more justice in this kind of very densely populated urban setting, especially in Asia. If you can resolve that, we can easily do Taipei, Singapore, the Philippines, and whatnot. And so it is something that unique in here because of scarcity of the land. Otherwise, we may miss at least 10% of the listings in some cases. Anyways, this directory is meant to list those venues in Hong Kong as of end of 2021, which fulfills the above criteria. It is not exhaustive, as we may miss many with our limited resources. I'm sure that the users may have realized some of the new things, new groups that they can send into sites to sort of constantly update of these sites. We hope that we just give a snapshot in 2021 of the geographical profile of the officially registered religious venue in Hong Kong in the matrix of type of religion as well as the district alongside with the schools operating by religious organizations. We hope that such directory can be a piece to complement the larger spiritual atlas developed by Professor Yang and to provide us with a contour of religious landscape in Hong Kong and continue to inspire academic discussions on the unique contour of religious landscape as a paradigm, hopefully, for religious profile in Asian urban settings. Once again, this current project has been built upon the groundwork of Ed Ahrens and Gordon Melton, the diligent assistant of Mr. Gao Xindong, and the generous and very competent support from Yang Fenggang and his excellent team of researchers. To all, I felt deeply grateful. And I felt that I have done my part. The collection is in excellent hands and can be shared to the public. And now I can really retire back into my retirement and in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chan, for this explanation and for your great work of collecting the data with all the care and attention to some difficult questions, difficult decisions to make. Really appreciate your effort. Before we move to the next speaker, I do want to show you something more. Let's see, we can make it look better. Oops. Okay, so if you see my, do you see my screen? I think this may be incorrect. Okay. Yeah, this, you're seeing this screen. In addition to the Chinese, to the English version of the maps, the analytic, data analytics, and we also have the Chinese version for Hong Kong. So all the functions are the same, but the religious sites are in Chinese. And also the districts, the religions are in Chinese, in the traditional characters. Okay. So that's if you go to Osage Maps, that's where you can find it, the Chinese version or the English version. Okay. Okay. Given the sheer number of Protestant Christian churches in Hong Kong and the importance of Christianity in Hong Kong overall, so we invited Professor Ying to talk about the current state of Christianity in Hong Kong. Professor Ying, please.
Okay, let me share my PowerPoint first. Good morning and good evening, everybody. This is Fuk-tsang Ying of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Thank you for the invitation of Professor Yang Fenggang. I'm happy to be here attending this launching event of OSAID Hong Kong. I would also like to express my deep appreciation with Dr. Kim-Kwong for collecting the great spatial data of the major religions in Hong Kong. I do believe that the database itself can provide a valuable platform for further scholarly investigation. As a historian, here I will focus on the regional development and spatial distribution of Protestant Christianity in Hong Kong from a historical perspective. First, let me introduce some basic information of Hong Kong's regional development. The territories of Hong Kong consist of 3 parts. There is Hong Kong Island, Kowloon, including Kowloon Peninsula and New Kowloon, and the new territories, including more than 200 large and small outlying islands. British occupation of Hong Kong Island began in 1841, and the island officially became a crown colony in 1842. The founding and extension of the colony was based on 3 treaties between the Qing and British empires. There is the Treaty of Nanjing, the Treaty of Beijing, and the Convention between Great Britain and China respecting an extension of Hong Kong territory. Hong Kong Island is very mountainous, so the population is concentrated in different villages in the south of the island, in which Chek Chu, now renamed Stanley, is the largest village with a population of 2,000. After 1842, the colonial government planned to develop the northern shore of the island as its political and economic center, representing the birth of the city of Victoria. Although the Kowloon Peninsula was incorporated into colonial territory in 1860, it was fully developed only after the British leased the new territories in 1898. The new territories was considered as a buffer zone between the colony and China southern mainland. In early 20th century, part of the new territories was absorbed into Kowloon in the name of New Kowloon. The new territories make up nearly 90% of Hong Kong territory. It remains a typical rural society, showing a great difference from the urbanized setting of the city of Victoria and Kowloon. In 1910, the Kowloon Canton Railway connecting the urban Kowloon and the rural new territories was put into services. However, much of the new territories stay less developed. The rapid development of the new territories is a new story of the government's massive implementation of the new town planning after the 1970s. In 1997, Hong Kong became a special administrative region of the PRC. With the increasing economic integration between Hong Kong and the mainland, and the launching of the Northern Metropolis Development Project initiated by the Hong Kong government, the landscape of Hong Kong is expected to change drastically in the coming decades. From a regional perspective, I will divide the development of Protestant Christianity in Hong Kong into 3 phases. First phase from 1842 to 1948, according to the record of Reverend Lau Yue-sing in the History of Christianity in Hong Kong, which published in 1941. There were 43 churches in Hong Kong in 1940, with a total of 28,000 congregations. According to my own statistics, before the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong in 1941, the total number of churches is 93. There are 29 local churches on Hong Kong Island, in which 19 churches are located in the city of Victoria. There are a total of 39 churches in Kowloon, mainly located in the early developed districts, such as Yau Ma Tei, Mong Kok, Kowloon City, and Sam Sui Po. There are 25 churches in the new territories, scattered in different areas. The city of Victoria was the focus of Christian development in 19th century Hong Kong. However, it was gradually surpassed by the development of Kowloon since the 20th century. The mission to the new territories was still underdeveloped in the first half of 20th century. The second phase from 1949 to 1970, out of the fear of the new communist regime, more than 1 million Chinese refugees poured into the British colony. Squatter housing was constructed everywhere to resettle the homeless. The colonial government built resettlement areas on Hong Kong Island and in Kowloon. The Christian Church was committed to responding to the urgent needs of post-war Hong Kong society. The resettlement areas became the focus of Christian welfare services and evangelistic works. Between 1950s and 1970s were the golden decades of Christianity. In 1955, the number of Christians was 53,000, with 188 local churches, then increased to 159,000 Christians with 470 local churches in 1968. We can see that Christianity is flourishing in post-war Hong Kong. The number of churches in Kowloon and the new territories surpassed that of Hong Kong Island. More than 70% of churches are now located in Kowloon and new territories. The third phase, after 1970, we have noted that new town development is an important factor affecting the spatial distribution of Christianity. From 1970 to 1990s, new towns were constructed in different areas in the new territories. For example, Tsuen Wan, Sa Tien, Tuen Mun, Tai Po, etc. As shown in the table, we can see the percentage of Protestant church on Hong Kong Island, in Kowloon, and the new territory respectively. Most of the churches are located in Kowloon and the new territories. OSE Hong Kong also gives us the picture of the distribution of church schools in Hong Kong. It is noteworthy that Christianity undertakes a great deal of educational work in post-war Hong Kong. More than 40% of secondary and primary schools are run by Protestant and Catholic Church organizations with government subsidy. 1/3 of Protestant church use the school hall as the venue of Sunday services. We can see that the location and distribution of Christian school is highly overlapping with that of the Christian churches. For the Hong Kong Island, OSE saw a north-south divide of Christianity. But the Eastern District, with the highest population on the island, has grown beyond the Central and Western District. In Kowloon, OSE saw that the Christian distribution is still concentrated in the August District, such as Yau Ma Tei, Mong Kok, Kowloon City, and Sam Sui Po. Kwun Tong, a new industrial town developed in post-war Hong Kong, which are the most densely populated district in Kowloon, is becoming another key area. For the new territories, Jose shows that the distribution of Christianity is most prominent in Sha Tin district, followed by Yunnan and Tuen Mun. Both are the most popular district in the new territories. There are also good developments in other new towns, such as Chunwan, Huicheng, Taipo, and Northern District. In understanding church growth, the author Donald McGowan highlights 3 factors that are affecting church growth. First, contextual factors, emphasizing macro, political, and social factors that influence and constrain church growth. Second, institutional factors, particularly the influence of church polity, ecclesiastical structures, and operational practices. For instance, influence of church polity on church planting, whether it is centralized model or local church model, is a subject of our concern. Third, spiritual factors that highlighting religious element at work. Indeed, among all religions, Christianity emphasizes the importance and urgency of evangelization. That is to spread the gospel to the unreached people. We can also compare the church growth pattern of ecumenical, evangelical, and charismatic church in Hong Kong. Of course, the overall development depends on the interactions of the contextual, institutional, and spiritual factors. For sure, urban development and pending are important contextual factors that are affecting the spatial distribution of Christian church in Hong Kong. In terms of urban planning, the northwest, northeast of the new territories and Lantau Islands are the current direction for government urban planning. Will this new district be the focus of church planting as the population grows? 2 other factors to be considered. First, migration flows in Hong Kong. By 2020, around 200,000 to 300,000 people emigrated from Hong Kong. The proportion of Christian immigrants is also high. As estimated by Hong Kong Church Renewal Movement, about 600 Christians emigrated to other countries in last 2 years. So what is the impact of migration on the Christian church? With the mass exiles of professional and young couples, the church finance and ministerial resources may significantly be affected. If this trend continues further, which is quite likely, that would in fact deteriorate the existing situation further. The second factor is government policy. As mentioned before, Running Church School is one of the main models of Christian church planting in the past decades. On the one hand, migration, particularly the decline of student population, will reduce the demand for education. School with insufficient enrollment will be closed. For those churches that use school hall as Sunday service venue, will also significantly be affected. On the other hand, does the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government intend to change the proportion of church school? Will the government's policy of allowing church to conduct Sunday service and religious instruction in school be changed in the future? All this remain to be our concern and closely affect the future development, including the spatial distribution of Protestant Christianity in Hong Kong. All right, I will stop here and come back to Fenggang. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ying, for this very helpful historical review of the Christian churches in Hong Kong. Each of the religions is important in Hong Kong. And we have so many of them, including some traditional Chinese religions, Buddhism, and what we labeled as a minor religions, that there are a few sites present. So we'll next turn to Professor Palmer for him to cover the rest of the religions.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fenggang, and hello, everybody. So I'm just going to, let me see, to share my screen here. Okay, all right. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, so we've just had the presentation on the situation of Christianity, particularly Protestantism in Hong Kong. And so I guess I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes talking about everybody else. And actually the way I'm going to do it is simply, I think what's really exciting about this online mapping tool of religious sites in Hong Kong is that it allows us to really discover the incredible number of sacred sites in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is known as a hyper-materialist city where everybody is always rushing to work and involved in finance as the major pillar of the economy, undoubtedly one of the most materialist places in the world. But actually what's really amazing is that it has such a high concentration of religious sites, which actually perhaps most Hong Kong people most of the time are perhaps too busy to even notice much of the time. But what we really realize when we look into and explore this online atlas of Hong Kong religious sites is just unbelievable. And all I'm going to do in these minutes is just show you just go through some of this diversity that this map allows us to discover a little bit. So let's see here. How do I? Right. So I'm just going to go through some of these different categories. And so the first one is about the folk temples. As Kim-Kwong had mentioned, this map actually only shows a tiny, tiny proportion of all the different folk religious sites and temples in Hong Kong. And there's also a difficulty sometimes in distinguishing between folk temples and Taoist temples, or folk temples, or others might call them Chinese religious or popular Chinese temples and so on. They're actually within this broad category of folk temples. There are many other, we could say there are different subcategories, but just if we look at the geographic concentrations here, one thing that we can see, of course, we can see because there's a lot of there's such a high population density in Kowloon and Hong Kong Island, so there's a lot of folk temples there. But we also see a pretty significant number in the other areas of the new territories in Lantau Island and so on. If we look at here the density, we will see, for example, right in the islands and the north in the new territories, we will see more temples. But in fact, it would be even more than that. And first of all, there are a number of different types of sacred sites that won't show up in this database because they are not enclosed buildings with street addresses. And one of these is earth god temples or earth god shrines. And you will find these, at least one in every single village in the new territories. So we're talking several hundreds of these. And we'll also find them often hidden in various corners, even in some of the urban sites of Hong Kong. So there's an incredible number of earth god temples, and then the village temples. So here we have hundreds of village temples. Every single village in the new territories has its own village temple, and sometimes even more than one. So these earth god temples and village temples, one thing that's important to know about them is that they represent what we call ascriptive communities. In other words, traditionally, everybody who's a resident of that village or of an alliance of villages is a member of this temple or participates in the rituals of this temple, and similarly would be part of the community that takes care of the shrine of the earth god. So these are what we call ascriptive temples, and this is one of the major categories of folk religious temples in Hong Kong. Now, not all folk religious activities take place in temples, and so another important part of the religious life is in the different festivals. For example, the Jiao festivals, the Taiping Qingjiu festivals, and which are where, in a sense, you have a temporary shrine which is established when these large cyclical festivals take place. The most well-known in Hong Kong is the Bun Festival on Chung Island every spring, but this happens in cyclically in actually every village will have them at some cycle of 5 years, 12 years, 20 years, or so on. And so we will see the Taoist priests coming out, and we'll also see the Taoist priests at the funeral parlors, as they are one of the most Taoist funerals are one of the most popular kinds of funerals in Hong Kong. So these types of activities don't necessarily take place in temples. And then we have floating temples, given that there's such a large fishing community in Hong Kong, and there's even an ethnic, the Tanka, a kind of a quasi-ethnic minority of people, the fishermen, those who have traditionally been fishermen over the centuries in Hong Kong. So here we have actually in Causeway Bay, a floating Tingho temple, and there are more of those. The best known of the popular religion temples in Hong Kong is the Qigong Temple in Sha Tin, which is one of the most popular places to go to on Chinese New Year. Now, another kind of popular religion is the redemptive societies. And so we have actually literally in the center of, not far from Causeway Bay, we have the headquarters of the Red Swastika Society, the Hongwen Zihui. And this was in the early 20th century, during the 1920s. It was the largest charity in China. It was imitating the Red Cross, so it's the Red Swastika. And it has a beautiful building in Hong Kong. It also runs a few schools still. There are other of these groups. So these are the kind of salvationists, what we call redemptive societies now, these groups that Dejiao, which you can see on the upper right here, the Tiande Shengjiao, which actually its headquarters moved from China to Hong Kong in the 1950s, and Yiguan Dao, which it has a presence. Many shrines and halls of Yiguan Dao exist in Hong Kong, although they keep an extremely low profile here. So it's very hard to find pictures of Yiguan Dao sites in Hong Kong. So that's for just to look at different types of popular or folk religion in Hong Kong, and then to move on to Taoist sites. What's important, if we can talk about some of the spatial, the historical development of Taoism in Hong Kong, is that, okay, we see there are a number of Taoist temples in the New Territories, and a lot of them are in Kowloon. And actually, the history of Taoism in Hong Kong goes back to the late 19th century and the early 20th century, when, of course, Taoism existed in Hong Kong before that. But a lot of the current temples of Taoism in Hong Kong are associated with a wave of different groups, Taoist groups that moved to Hong Kong or established themselves. Many of them were associated with a salvationist movement called the Xiantian Dao. Many of these groups were either vegetarian, many of them were also for women, and many of the Taoist temples, the lesser known Taoist temples, which you will find kind of all over the place, are affiliated or inheritors of this tradition of the Xiantian Dao, the way of traditional of anterior heaven. So there's one wave of these Xiantian Dao temples. Another wave of groups were the groups that practice Fuji, spirit writing. And this is really interesting in Hong Kong. Of course, we'll also find this in Taiwan. It's very not well known that, in fact, in China, in the late imperial period, one of the most widespread form of religious activity all over the place was spirit writing, where we have a medium who receives messages from the deities, and which come out in the form of poems and predictions and medical prescriptions and all kinds of things. And there's not much of it in China, but there are many spirit writing halls which still exist in Hong Kong, and many of them are affiliated to Taoism. And actually, many of the main Taoist temples in Hong Kong used to be spirit writing halls, including, for example, the Wang Daixin, the Huangdaxian, and also some of these. So these major, the most important Taoist temples in Hong Kong, such as Wang Daixin, the Fenggang Xingkun, the Pengxian Guan, the Yuan Yuan Institute, and the Qingsong Guan. Many of these temples are kind of grew out of some of those earlier movements that I mentioned of the Xian Tiandiao and the spirit writing associations. So now then, just to move on to some of the Buddhist sites, I don't really know enough about Buddhism in Hong Kong to really speak at length about the situation of Buddhist temples. But what's interesting is if we look at the major Buddhist temples in Hong Kong, the Jilin Monastery, which is located in Kowloon, actually not far from the Wang Daixin Temple, is a very fancy, it's been rebuilt a couple decades ago in Tang Dynasty, really exquisite, beautiful, kind of calm. It's kind of upper kind of not really grassroots style. And this is what we will find in the main Buddhist temples in Hong Kong, such as the Jilin Monastery, and also the Zishan Monastery in Tai Po, which was actually built by Li Ka-shing, and which has the huge statue of Guanyin and a very kind of high upper class kind of feel, a very exquisite kind of Buddhist taste, which is kind of being propagated in this temple, and also a very high concentration of Buddhist monasteries and sites on Lantau Island, including the well-known Bolin Monastery, where we have the great Buddha of Lantau Island. And also what's just incredible is there's just so many other monasteries that are kind of hidden in the hills in Hong Kong. I think there are dozens of them, which nobody really knows about, but which are there. And so, you know, you could spend years just going around to all these temples and monasteries in Hong Kong and visiting them. We have every single lineage and sect of Buddhism in Hong Kong, as, for example, Tibetan Buddhism in the bottom left there. On the bottom right here, we have the Thich Nhat Hanh, the Plum Village is in Lantau Island. And we have some pictures here of the 10,000 Buddhas monastery, and every different form of Buddhism is represented in Hong Kong. And then we have new movements that are derived from Buddhism, such as Soka Gakkai, which has a very large center in Kowloon. And then to go on to the other religions, there are at least 5 or 6 and probably more that we don't know about, different Buddhist, different Hindu organizations and sites, ranging from some of the older, this Hindu temple, but also we have ISKCON, the Hare Krishnas, Krishna consciousness. Not only is Krishna consciousness has a center, but there are even offshoots or cousin organizations of this lineage of Hinduism that can be found in Hong Kong. There's a Zoroastrian temple, and actually the Zoroastrians have contributed significantly to the history, to the commerce in Hong Kong during the colonial era. And what's interesting is that the Zoroastrians own this high-rise because their temple was originally on this great location in the center of Hong Kong, and so they've built an office building, and the temple itself is on one of the higher floors where there is the fire and where Zoroastrian services take place. There are three major mosques in Hong Kong, and many other madrasas and smaller places of worship, even in the New Territories and so on, of all different sects of Islam as well can be found. The Baha'i faith has 2 and even we could say 3 centers. One is located in near Causeway Bay, the other one Tim Sha Tsui, and one in Shek Kip Mei. And we also have all the booming new age or body, mind, spirit activities, which are often take place in kind of commercial yoga studio kinds of places, and also temporary kinds of festivals and these types of carnival activities. Very popular in Hong Kong, and which kind of mix together some traditional Chinese forms of spirituality and global circulatory forms of spirituality come from India and the West, and so on. Right, if you look on the map, then we will find everything else too. We will find the Unification Church, we will find Falun Gong, we will find you name it, various Japanese new religious movements, have large center near where I live in Saikong. Basically, just to give you a very brief overview, that in Hong Kong is a microcosm of practically, well, it's not all the religion in the world, although I'm sure that if we dug deeply, I don't know if we could find some African religion, I'm sure there are African churches in Hong Kong, but almost the whole globe is represented in terms of all of its different religious traditions, and different types of religious sites and practices. And so this map online atlas of religion in Hong Kong is a great way just to get into and start exploring the tremendous religious wealth of Hong Kong. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Palmer, for this excellent overview, very quick overview of many of the religions. Hong Kong is a place of religious diversity, very high level religious diversity, all kinds of religions are present, and also played important roles, both for Hong Kong itself, but also broader in the neighboring places, societies. So the Osage Hong Kong is only the beginning. It's a platform for you to explore the presence of religions in Hong Kong, but the other dimensions added by our speakers really will make it much richer. Now, I'd like to see whether we have some questions from the audience. Yeah, again, if any of you have any question, please type it in the chat room. And right now I see a couple of them. Well, there's a very good praise, and Patricia Herzog said, what an incredible resource. Thank you to everyone who was involved in collecting, analyzing, visualizing, and making publicly accessible this data tool. Thank you for your good work.
Excuse me. Just to respond to David Palmer's question. Yes, 2 months ago, I documented African voodoo practice group in Hong Kong.
No.
Voodoo.
No. Just 2 months ago, I got a document. It's collect another butterfly.
Right.
Yeah,
and
3 different
also
African churches from Gambia, Central African Republic, Congos, and also another group by Nigerians. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's
Just
even ayahuasca now, ayahuasca kind of hallucinogenic kind of
ayahuasca is already here. Yes.
Shamanism is also there are groups that are doing that. Yes.
Ayahuasca from Brazil, I remember.
Right.
Yes, they have a group here.
Yeah.
So fascinating place.
Okay. Actually, there are a couple of questions. One of that relate to this, what you just mentioned. So here, let me read this from Xin-Feng Hong. Thank you for creating this helpful database. I can't wait to explore it and use it in my own research. I have 2 questions. How often will the database be updated? That's question 1. Question 2, what do we do if we find information not included or if we know of information change, for instance, that a church relocated. So how often we may update the database, and if a user find some new information, what can be done? Let me try first, then maybe Dr. Chang can follow. We hope to update all the information, but it may not be very frequent. We know this is an important time. If you think about the 50 years period of the one country, two systems, now we are at the very midpoint, 25 years into it, and there are 25 years to go. We, of course, want to document and to see the religious change over the years. So I do hope that we can update the information, the database, but it will depend on whether we can systematically collect new information and how often Dr. Chang can do, or someone else, other people, other scholars could do the work. And the second question is if anyone has any new information, what to do. I would welcome anyone to send information to us through email. The email address, I can type that in, is really Center on Religion and the Global East at Purdue. So crge@purdue.edu. We'll keep that open and we'll see what we can do when we get enough new information. Dr. Chan, do you have anything to comment on this?
I am retired. I have virtually no resource to speak of. So it all depends if there are groups or some institutes in Hong Kong who have such resources, say graduate student, research assistants, and some kind of budget, then it may be possible to do, say, every 3 or 5 years an update, because it involves quite a lot of intensive labor in a very short period of time to screen over all the existing ones as well as to document the new ones or delete the old ones. So it's a matter of resources, availabilities, and intensive labor, not expensive labor. So I'm looking for some graduate students, and I'm not in this position already that I can have resources, and it will be hopefully some other institutions can carry on. And also an institution that doesn't have certain kind of strong religious self-interest, so that in order to be fair to all religions.
Okay. Yeah, just hope other researchers will come forward and do the work. It's so interesting about religion in Hong Kong, from social scientific perspective, from historical perspective. It's just a fascinating place to study. We have some other questions. Let me read some of this. Okay, this is from Hector Prieto. I hope I pronounced that correctly or close. Okay, I have two questions. I would like to know if the Three Self-Patriotic movement has any influence on Protestant churches in Hong Kong. The second question is if there are any kind of contact between Protestant churches of Hong Kong and the Protestant house churches in urban China. I would direct this question to Professor Ying. Could you unmute yourself, Professor Ying?
Fenggang, would you please repeat the question? I can't see the question in the chat room.
Right, that question sent directly to me in
okay.
direct message. So it's first, if the Three Self Patriotic movement has any influence on Protestant churches in Hong Kong, if there are any kind of contact between Protestant churches of Hong Kong and the Protestant house churches in urban China.
Okay, I think according to the basic law that guarantee the one country, two system, Hong Kong will not set up the TSPM, that is the patriotic committee in Hong Kong. But I think that the Hong Kong church, I think all over every Hong Kong people, not only religious believer, we must learn how to love the country, love one country, love China. So I think the significant change is not institutionally, but in some sense, in the way of patriotism. That is the main challenges we face. Yeah.
Okay. Anna Sun, Professor Anna Sun is here. She asked, I don't seem to be able to find the 3 Confucian sites in the database that Professor Chan mentioned. Well, you should be able. Let me share the screen again. Now you should see my screen. If you are on the religious sites, once you click on the religious sites, then you can use the filter function and select we have why not Confucianism? Or religion. Okay, that's okay. Religion, Confucianism. If you select religion, Confucianism.
Yeah, you can see there are 3 dots.
Yeah, there are 3 dots here, here. Yeah, because of the color, we have exhausted colors for each color representing different religion. So that perhaps makes some of this hard to see. Here, 2 on the Hong Kong island, 1 is in Kowloon.
Yeah.
And if you go to the thematic maps and Hong Kong schools, and then again use the filter function, there are some Confucian schools. I thought that was really interesting. Do we see that? Oh, yeah, here. Oh, maybe only 1. Yeah, because of the special interest in Confucianism. Let me try this one again. The minor religions, there are 3 sites. So I guess the 3 sites have also the schools. 2 on the island, 1 is in Kowloon. Okay.
So just to supplement, the one in Kowloon has a school. The 2 other sites in Hong Kong side does not operate schools. They just basically the Confucius Hall for their own internal instruction and rituals. But the one in Kowloon operates a high school at the same site. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And actually, another thing to mention about Confucianism is that many of the a number of the Taoist temples actually are under the 3 and the Sanjiao He kind of tradition, and so they worship Confucius. And some of the redemptive societies, such as Yiguan Dao, actually do a lot of Confucian classics learning. So you would find that a lot of the Confucian activities, specifically Confucian activities, maybe in some of the other religious, in the other religious community, in the other under the name of other religions. There was one question about the urban renewal. I was interested to
yes,
to address that one. There was one question about if anybody could comment on any conflicts between urban renewal and religious sites in Hong Kong, and how are these usually resolved. So it's not something that I've actually studied at all in any way, but I do know of a couple of examples, and this is in the New Territories. What's interesting in Hong Kong, actually, I live in a village in the New Territories in Sai Kung, and I noticed that when new developments take place, the villages will always be preserved. There's like an indigenous special rights of the indigenous people of Hong Kong who live in the villages. And so literally around my village, for example, there's a huge development that's taking place, and it's like all around the village. And so you will often find this in Hong Kong, that an entire new neighborhood with, high-rise, 20 or 30 high-rise buildings, and right in the middle of it, there's a village. And so that temple or whatever, that village temple would be there in that village. And this development that is now has taken off the construction so on a few years ago around where I live, actually it had been delayed for about 20 years. And one of the reasons was, not the only reason, but one of the reasons was that there are many graves in the land. Traditionally, the people would bury, the graves are scattered in the New Territories. And those are sacred sites. And so the villagers had mobilized, and they had managed to obstruct the starting of the project for quite a long time, until it was negotiated, some kind of negotiation settlement was made. And another example, which is not a village, kind of indigenous village situation, there was actually a Taoist temple in Yuen Long right now, where actually I take my students on field visits to observe spirit writing. It had a large kind of land, but often, and the issue is, as Chen Kim-Kwong mentioned, there's no specific religious law or law on religion in Hong Kong. And so that, on the one hand, gives a lot of freedom of religion, that you can do so much. But on the other hand, often the status of the legal title to land is a little unclear. For example, this temple, it was basically an individual had bought the land a long time ago, and the temple, and kind of donated the part of the land to build the temple. But now that person, wanted, or the inheritor of that person wants the land back for himself. But the temple now has a whole community and everything. So there's all these kind of disputes. And in the midst of that, a developer bought all the land around it, and there's a dispute now going on. You can write comments to the government. There's a consultation period, but the plan is that they would take all the extra land, but not the temple itself. So now you'll be looking down from your balcony, and there's going to be like 50-story towers or whatever, and right down in the middle of it is going to be that temple. So they're keeping that temple there, which will have its own little separate entrance, kind of, I guess, cut off from, the kind of gated community, all these high-rise residential buildings. So these are just two examples that it's kind of interesting to see how these things are negotiated.
Thank you, Professor Palmer. There are a couple of questions about what our database may include. One question is it possible to add a time domain to the present map so that we may be able to see the development of religious sites over time? Unfortunately, we don't have it. Don't have that function. Another question is from Professor Yasuki Matsutani. And does this database include information about languages of each religious sites? For example, Protestant churches speaking Cantonese or Mandarin, Orthodox Church speaking Russian or English. Again, unfortunately, the current database does not include this information. Even though that's a very interesting, important question, but the current database does not have that function. But before we go, I think you can try to explore others. Yes, this is a limited database and atlas, but there are things you can find can be interesting. For example, if you go to the religious sites and use this little symbol, adding data, here you can find some other data. For example, the metro system in Hong Kong. If you search the metro system and click add, you see this metro stations, and that's how close to the religious sites. And then, of course, you can filter out only one religion, keep one religion, and then see the metro system. There are a lot of information provided already, and you can see the connections, correlations. But there are informations so far the database cannot provide. Maybe in the future in some way, but it does take a lot of resources to get those systematic information. There are other questions. I think for the details, you may first explore to see what you can get from this. But this, just like a atlas book, it can provide limited information, but useful information. You do need the other types of research. Those more in-depth descriptions and analysis, statistical analysis to go with it in order to have a good grasp of religions in Hong Kong. So I hope this just be a useful tool for teaching, for research, for further development. Okay, let me see whether we have any specific question we can answer. Okay, here, I think this one, the last one I can see, there are questions coming in. So could the panelists say a few words about to know how Taoism and folk religions are operationalized? For instance, Daojiao Yuxingong seems to be categorized as folk religion. Dr. Chang, would you see something on this?
There is definitely a very blur areas existing in Hong Kong. First of all, the Hong Kong Taoist Association does have a full list of their members, consists of most of the Taoist groups, but also in the, at least 10 years ago, they proclaimed that they will also include all folk religions, as they claim that their definition of folk religion is part of the Taoism. So therefore, many of the folk religious groups joined in for various interests, if not political, so that this umbrella organization can speak on their behalf with the government negotiating for various rights and deals. So therefore, there are groups certainly joining the Taoist group. So in the Taoist Association's website, you will notice that there are a number of Taoists originally, plus many other folk religious groups clearly joining in tagging along with under the umbrella of the Taoism. But at the same time, there are a number of Taoist temples not wanted to join them, and even there are also many the folk religious groups refuse to join under the Taoism. So therefore, we do have a very confused situation. And that at this particular Yuxingong, it is not listed in the Taoist directory. And I have spoken with those people before of various reasons. And those groups within the Taoist association seems to have some kind of unspeakable reasons to reject this group in particular. So and then I had actually passed by the site. It doesn't look like a Taoist temple to me, so to speak. But I could not contact with that particular group. So for the sake of cautious, I temporarily list them under the folk religious sector until I have further so-called reasons or evidence or information to put them as Taoist. If I put it in a Taoist group, it may raise certain kind of unpleasant political tension within the particular group. So there are these interesting cases. Not only this case, at least I can document a whole number of those undefined areas. Perhaps we can come up with a new category to bypass all that. Say any group that's not excluded Buddhist, then Chinese religion, whatever it is. I'm sure that will encounter not only in Hong Kong, but in Southeast Asia and in Taiwan and any other places. We may encounter similar of these kind of classification issues. So that's the, yes, you raise a good point. Yes, and thank you for spotting out. Yes, this is at this moment what I can come up with until I have further information to reclassify it, or those people will come up and raise their concerns. I'll probably try to send this link to them, to the Yixinggong's people. Couldn't contact them actually. I tried.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Chen, for the explanation. It is difficult to make classifications for Taoism and folk religion. Some are clear, but many are really in borderland for some reason, for complicated reasons. Okay, so there's one question I can answer. That is, are users able to access the position data in Hong Kong in CSV? Currently, no. Currently, if you click on any of the point on the religious sites map, you do get all the information. And we will publish the data on a Purdue University data archive site so that it will be available for anyone to download all the information in the database, and also the shape files. That's for the map purposes. It will be made public soon. We'll see how soon we can do it, because we need the manpower to do this kind of work. There are questions about the potential change given the current political situation and the changing situation. And for many of those, perhaps we cannot speculate too much about the future. And all of us want to watch closely what is happening and what will happen, and check back with our center. We hope to organize some events in the future to have more in-depth discussion on religious change in Hong Kong and church-state relations in particular. But for now, for the launching of Osage Hong Kong, I think the session has reached the end. And thank you all for your participation. Thank you all the speakers for your insights to help us to understand the state of religion in Hong Kong at this point in the year 2022. We will make the video recording of this special event available soon on YouTube, and also you may check back again with our center's website, globaleast.org. You should get those information. If you are interested, also please subscribe to our newsletter. You should be able to find the place to put in your subscription as a free e-newsletter. that's all for today. Thank you all. And again, and thank you, the speakers.